social injustice. Now, in relation to all these phenomena or crises, empathy, or rather the lack thereof, perhaps, plays an important role. And as this sort of pill for, empathy seems to be the magical word, the remedy, to create, as it says here, the side effects are courage, hope, peace, and it needs heart, a good dose of heart, and eggs, I mean literally eggs, but I guess balls, courage to do that. So, but I think, as you have seen from the various titles of sessions, we're also critical about that. I think there are some problems with looking or fostering empathy all of the time. We had good discussions on that already yesterday. What are the sort of dark sides of this? So let me just, before Markus Wild will talk about the concept and some of its analogues, over the past, yesterday also some of its analogues came up. Why did you call it compassion? Would sympathy be better? Understanding, love even, maybe, though that seemed a bit corny to use that term. So I just want to thank you for coming to this conference, for your curiosity, I think, about other perspectives on the topic, for your openness and attention to each other, which can all be summed up. Thank you for your empathic engagement. So I lead over to Markus Wild, who is the co-chair of this conference, as mentioned. He is professor of theoretical philosophy since 2013 here. And his main focus is the philosophy of mind, and especially animal philosophy. It's too hot for his dog Titus to come tonight, but we would have. He's known for the professor who brings his dog to the classroom, so that to also really see the other there, not just talk about an object somewhere. I won't say whether he's good. Well, no. Now, he started his career in early modern history of philosophy, and now he mainly works in the philosophy of mind, as mentioned, the philosophy of ethology and animal ethics. And the title of his talk is Empathies and Perspectives. You don't have a PowerPoint, no? Good. Well, you read. And animal ethics. Yeah. And the title of his talk is Empathies and PowerPoint.
Thank you very much, Manuela, and welcome in Basel and welcome to this conference from my side as well. I'm very much looking forward to our discussions and exchanges ahead. We had a very promising start yesterday. I've been participating in a workshop on animals and empathy, and as I have heard, the other workshops have been also very exciting and rewarding. I hope that you will feel comfortable and at ease during these 4 days here in Basel, despite the rather demanding weather conditions. But some of you already told me that you like heat. And at ease during these 4 days here in Basel, despite the rather demanding weather conditions. But some of you already told me that you like heat.
I know this is an exit. So what we could do is just put them in the corner behind the ECAS shield thing there. Yeah.
Oh, nice to meet you. Yeah, it's very nice. Nice to say too.
I don't think you can do that actually, because you cannot obstruct the ways out.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's okay, just one person. So So that's one. Yeah, you have only space for one area.
Yes.
So are we expecting a second or not?
The issue is if somebody sits in here.
Well, it's gonna be neck up anyway. So even from a normal chair, it's not really comfortable here either.
Yeah.
But that's just the way it is.
Yes.
But I guess you're looking at the speaker, so it's difficult to navigate inside because of the floor rail.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So
we need one more. That's the question.
For the sake that one more comes to I think we should take one more for 2 chairs. Or we leave it.
No, there is enough space.
Okay,
So that's fine. I mean, it's not gonna, do you think it's completely packed?
Yeah, then I think this would be really well. So the sun can decide where she is. Yes, if that's really fun.
Yeah, let's just leave it. We can quickly review it if we need to.
So, yeah,
Just 4. How many people? Don't you want to put them here? Just one. Then people can see it because nobody's going to look at the back. No, just lay on because you're going to look very soon. So how many reserved spaces do we need? Let's just reserve a couple. Well, we can reserve the one next to it for the sun.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
I think.
But it's better, but I don't know.
Don't waste it. We can reuse those when you need something else. And I wouldn't use that because you're just going to destroy the gym.
So would be here.
Yeah, I mean we're here anyway, so we can just check. Whenever someone's sitting down, you can just take the yeah. How many do we need?
Like you said, this is
Are those ones are the important ones, and those are the small ones. They're just like, yeah, they're important enough to get a reservation, but not really. So how many do we need?
yes.
Yeah, they're important enough to get a reservation, but as many people know who has visas.
Yes, I think it's those who are going to do
But then you
they will be there.
no, I don't know yet.
Sometimes actually access to try this morning. Because we never tried it.
But here is our.
We don't have to do anything.
You know everything.
Yeah. We have catching service here now?
Yeah.
But we don't do
But, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
So that's all right.
Maybe the sunset of here. For the people.
For the catching service?
Yeah, because yesterday I saw there was a special
You can
table.
just take one of those, actually.
No,
We
you
cannot.
have to.
I just asked for permission. Here.
Jacob Ryan's words when he said, "Oh, tonight, not tomorrow."
Well, sometimes good. I mean, I went to work to help a friend to move.
No, it's. I had a friend from Scotland, and Scottish people they like to drink. It's hard to stop.
Drink and talk.
Yeah, exactly. As it should be, right? But I mean, I'm not as, let's say, resistant than Scottish people are. Because I don't think, I mean, there will be a lot of people, but I'm not sure it will be packed. Yeah, when it's happening, when it's really, really growing, and we realize it's working. Yeah, I think so too.
So now, actually, I mean, there is this, I think there's a shout in there.
Is it light battery?
Yeah,
That's what you
yes,
said.
you must take a look on it.
Yeah, as long as you cross it, nothing happens. Also, remember when you took out the boy, right? So she had more space at the back, so she moved. That probably that was the moment when it went down, and we were like, "What happened? We didn't do anything." What do you know anything about the keynote speaker tonight? Because I have absolutely no plan for like
because every
okay. Because if there is one thing I don't have at this conference, then it's a clue about what's actually happening.
not only you, not only you, not only you. So, okay. She writes in Dima, I don't know how it is.
Well, here.
Yes. Because you know, as I understood, the system, you have to fix another Dima.
Yeah, but apparently there is a they're going to do that and everything. Look, that's what somebody said.
Our customer.
To tell you again. Maybe they're going to set a second one up here or somewhere. I don't know. Well, it said we didn't have to set up a beamer here. That's what someone has said. That's what the manual of the thingy said. But you can tell me otherwise, and I'll be happy to set the beamer up. I don't care, but that's just we didn't have to apparently. So, and I tend, in those kind of situations, I tend to take people by their word. It's irritating. Slight form of OCD, I know, but I find it disgusting. No, I'm not doing that. But if I see that it's not, then I can't help it. And you've seen this 100 times.
It's not real.
I thought in Rio was Brazil.
Brazil
Rio. Yeah, it must be. A new definition of Africa. Yes. Well, there were parts. There was chaos.
So we have Africa.
Diaspora. Yeah, it's not a real diaspora. It's just. you pick yourself space. How much space you need a table now? Okay, yeah, we don't have that. Oh yeah, people will start saying that. That's fine. It was open before. I'm Basel, by the way. Just so. Nice. Yeah. Okay, dat is super. Dat is sogar nog fijn. Ja, perfect. Ja, hier wird, also ich nehme so viele Flächen sind wieder umgelaufen, aber ich gehe mal davon aus, dass es... Du kannst, there is going to be a discussion afterwards. I don't know, but I figure there will be questions and some sort of discussions. Aber der wird das Mikro, wo die gleiche Dinge sagen. Also, das gehört mir über. Sollen wir mal ein kleines Tangent zu merken, wie wir es gibt?
Ja, irgendwie gerne. Also, wir haben uns nicht verstanden.
You're a boss, okay.
Your wishes are commanded.
Yeah.
Probably. So you bring a table there. Great. Good. Would you want us to remove these chairs? One of these ones? So you have some place here. It's good. Okay, the other one? I think that these two are good.
Yeah, wait, yeah.
Just some force must apply for station phase.
Yeah.
Maybe all there together, sign up.
Because I can sit like that, so I can sit.
Yes.
Oh,
We don't want you to get congested, so you take two and then it's like.
And also we have to make sure that there's enough space for the way out.
Yes.
Right.
So I think we put it near the door there.
Yeah. Or behind the thing. Can we stay for it?
Yes. Yes. You said some force I must apply?
Yeah.
Superman.
I wouldn't be too sure about that.
Superman.
No, I definitely not super.
You can leave one here for me.
Oh, sorry. So, what's up? Okay, now the table. No, it's fine. So, so we need a proper table. Ja. We moeten hier voor komt hier de vis naar. Dat zit er ook van achter. Die stellen er mee. Dat is goed. Wat is dat? Dus dan neem je een andere zijde door. Ja, also ein Beam ist oder ja. Also der Tisch, da steht wo du musst und dann sollte der neben dran. Das ist aber wer schauen, dass er hier ist. Ich weiß nicht genau, wer der Beam wird aufsetzen, wahrscheinlich werde ich mehr schlussendlich viel sagen machen. Aber das ist ein Festplatte. Das sollte das wäre eine Sache. Da hat es genug da unten. Das kann man sicher für.
Links da und so ist eigentlich.
No, perfect. Okay, then we got to get a table, which we can place here.
Yeah.
That's not
Is your cable long enough or you need an extension cable?
I have one.
You have an extension cable. Perfect. Great.
But only one. I didn't
Yeah.
We shall.
I'll go and check with something.
Okay, then I check with you. Okay.
Du kannst die nicht planen oder du sagst Sachen oder was.
This one is it tall enough for you? Okay. And I think we have to lock the salaries. Yes, great. Go. And then we can set the beamer. We shall still need to do this and this and that. Because the probability that if we walk this way is bigger amount. Then we have to be able to sit here. Right here. Do you think something? I don't think anybody will sit here. So this. Anybody will sit here. Just that anybody who will have to pass here has to very
Or, I mean, I could sit me on the front.
that would be perfect.
So we can
Yeah. So the beamer has to come something here. Okay, that's very logical.
Yeah, but it's almost 7. 6 past already, no?
Yeah, I think it's 20 minutes or 15 minutes.
This one, yes, go place. Okay.
Somebody tells you and you go too far forward, you're just going to be stuck. It's not like you're going to move.
To increase the desk work, but I will check later.
Okay, so very simply, just make sure you have the edge, of the light ray, press that.
Oh, I should do
Okay, so now,
Das stimmt, ja. Aber ich meine, die Bilder sind natürlich gibt es jetzt gar nicht in der Gegend. So,
yeah. Should we maybe use for the day decision?
that's why we
So is that a reserve?
yes. Very much so.
You got it.
I wrote out analysis for that for Jacob. That's one of the so I hope it can fix it. As the center, not here.
That's at the 90s? Okay, but we have to do that today.
Yes, there is no tomorrow.
There is a...
There's no tomorrow, you have all you have is today. Yes.
Yeah, but I think we'll look at I think
But I have my
We're going to carry you on it.
Well, of course, they can fall over, but that's what I do every day in my computer. Fall over, it's broken. I mean, it's not only this piece that's going to if you know where it is, and I don't know
if she says go, then we can go.
I'm not going because I don't even know where I'm going. Oh, sorry. I'm just suggesting.
könnte morgen auch noch mit Hilfe machen. Wenn das für uns okay ist. In the corner, there is no light.
Oh, yes, right.
Can you help me to put it here? There is no light. Be careful with this one.
Excuse me, sir. Is that aesthetically beautiful to have it there? Is it nice to have it there?
I just saw because of light, because there is no much light.
Because I don't think it's good it's there on the stage. Because we know it's ECAS. I mean, if it's a big banner, there is a small banner down. That's a good thing.
So I have another. Can you bring me the camera?
We really sit on the stage today.
You have tape? You have tape?
Yes, I heard it.
Morgen kann es endlich komplett losgehen. So this is unnecessary. If it's just to
Yes.
to hold the hold the Can you bring back the wall? Yeah.
Wie funktioniert das Mikrofon? Also ich glaube, wir brauchen sie heute
Heute
nicht.
braucht es nur das.
Ja, heute braucht es nur das. Und falls wir es würden brauchen, morgen oder so.
Ich habe doch allen von euch eine Einführung gegeben in das Mikrofon. Oder sind Sie nicht dabei?
Ja, heute braucht es nur das. Nimmt man es und dann...
Also ich habe jetzt keine Zeit, um euch das zu zeigen, aber morgen bin ich auch wieder da.
Ah ja, also dann ist gut. Dann ist kein Problem.
No, out. We don't use it anymore. No, out. I would propose to take the feet separate.
das ist keine Sache. Können Sie so weit offen lassen, die ganze Zeit?
Nein, aber ja, das ist tot, aber
Es hat so ein Mikrofon.
ja, aber das ist wie ein Mikrofon sind, wenn man einen Hörgerät hat. Das ist, du weißt nie.
Okay.
Ja.
Ich habe jetzt eine das habe ich zu Hause, aber ich mache es morgen mit dem Manfrotto. Weil da muss man.
Ich würde es jetzt mal aufbauen, weil dann kann man nämlich schon umswitchen. Das steht ja dann fest auf dem Tisch.
Ja. Ich sehe, steht in der Ecke vom Büro. Ja. Rechts und lassen.
Am Sorgen?
Bitte?
Am 7. für Sorgen?
Um 7 Uhr, ja. Ab 7 Uhr, ja. Bald.
Jetzt ist es 10 Minuten noch.
Ja, noch 8 Minuten. Also.
Ich bin ja froh, dass ich schon durch bin.
Ja. Wo sind am besten platziert? Am besten. Yes, we're going for music as well. Yes, yeah. We still have to check the inventories before we jump and sing.
Oh, yeah, but it's a good
Yeah. So, we have 8 more minutes to go.
Should we open the door?
We go to yours. Okay, that's very good.
His name is so we should probably open the doors.
You want to that? Sanjeev, he's very good business. Very good business.
No time. Dat Oranje is wel interessant.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear delegates to ECAS 2017, dear participants in the business forum we had this afternoon,
dear friends of the Center for African Studies, it's a great pleasure to welcome you here in the aula of the University of Basel. And we are very used to the very young visitors who are with us tonight, because usually when we come here, it is for the diploma ceremonies of our MA students and grad students, and mostly there are families around, so don't feel shy, it's perfectly okay. It's a great honor to welcome the African Studies community here in Basel at this university, which we are very fond of. It's a very nice alma mater. It has got a nice architecture. It has got no air conditioning though. So we are not too worried about the weather. It's actually fine that it's not as hot as it was last week. And for us, it's also really a great honor and pleasure to have the Karl Schlettwein lecture, our annual distinguished lecture, here in the aula of the Kollegienhaus. Usually we hold it in the Basler Afrika Bibliographien on Klosterberg. Some of you know this place. It's a research library, archive. There's much of a family atmosphere there. It's cozy, and we fill it usually to the brim. But yes, those are 60 to 80 people, and we have a good time with our lecture. Rarely do we go out and enter like a huge hall like this, and we were a little bit nervous about it. Will there actually be enough people to fill it? Yes, there are. And I think our concept of placing the Karl Schlettwein lecture this year just in front of the conference and in between the pre-conference and conference was a very fine decision, because it allows us to reach out to our friends, to different communities, to the business and politics world and to the African studies world. And it's a wonderful occasion for us also to have this lecture presented by Miriam De Bruyne on the topic of digitization and African studies. Now, since we are having the welcome tomorrow, I won't lose more words than these and hand over to Elise Macamo, who will introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you very much.
So good evening. Thank you, Veit. So dear Frau Dr. Schlettwein, dear Pierrette, I don't see Lucio here, but if he were here, I would say dear Lucio. Dear members of the board of the Schlettwein Foundation, dear executive secretary of the BAB, I don't see him here, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very delighted to introduce our keynote speaker tonight, Miriam De Bruyne, Professor of Contemporary History and Anthropology of Africa at the University of Leiden, and perhaps the second most brilliant Dutch national to visit Basel since September 1514. I know it is part of this ritual of introducing a keynote speaker to overdo it. Everybody expects that, not least the person in question, who, if they are modest, like Miriam is, will be wondering how they came by this honor. I'm grateful to Miriam De Bruyne's remarkable academic record that I do not have to exaggerate anything. In fact, it is in the nature of brilliant people, or brilliant scholars, that whatever we say about their accomplishments will come across as an exaggeration. But that is simply because they rise above the average and, annoyingly, I must say, remind us of what we could have achieved ourselves if we had tried harder. Now, in her work, she straddles disciplines, so history and anthropology, And she uses the interdisciplinary perspective which this accords her to cast a look at a vast array of topics, a really vast array of topics. So nomadism, youth and children, social security, and of course social insecurity, poverty, marginality, social and economic exclusion, violence and human rights, and of course information and communication technologies, which is going to be the subject of her talk tonight. Now, these topics describe the theme that will keep us busy over the next 3 days. In fact, they describe the properties of African urban settings, bringing to our attention how our scholarly endeavor is shaped by an interest in the way things came to be the way they are. So history, one of her interests, on the one hand, and how they locally produce the conditions of their own intelligibility on the other hand. And that's anthropology, the other part of her. So through her work, Miriam is at home in most parts of West Africa, in Chad, in Mali, in Niger. She is what she does research on, a nomad, a mobile person, but also an artifact of the world in which we live. And this world does not consist of foreign lands and home, but rather of foreigners roaming homes. So St. Augustine is said to have once remarked that the world is a book, and those who do not travel read only one page. I know people who don't travel and who could benefit a lot from reading that one page, if only they cared to. But with this quote, I wish to make the trivial point that our keynote speaker has not only read many pages, but also produced many more that the current generation of anthropologists of Africa is reading with a lot of profit. She has, by her own account, but also by what she claims to be her politically inspired and engaged choice of subject, brought countless pages of the margins of the world to the center, offering us glimpses of worlds taking place far away from the immediacy of the narcissist gaze, shaping how we seek to retrieve the world in the social sciences. And this brings me to the second thing which I want St. Augustine's quote to help me to do. It's perhaps the most important one, namely my wish to articulate the significance of Miriam's work with this annual lecture. There's something about her work which connects her so wonderfully to the work of Carl Schlettwein, his family, and the Schlettwein Foundation. Just as Miriam de Bruyne is interested in eliciting from the margins those points of intersection that make them part of us here and us part of them there, the Schlettwein connection here in Basel has devoted a considerable part of its life and of its resources to responding to the historical entanglements that make us fellow travelers in this world. Now, owing to the conditions that came together to make them, the Schlettwein, the bearers of that solidarity, not me in Mozambique, not anyone in Africa, but them here in Switzerland, here in Europe, the continent that made the world in its own image, the continent that made the world almost inhospitable to the rest of us. Should we now raise the question whether it is appropriate to seek the shade which they created through their generosity to speak about what matters in life? Just as we ask whether we should burn the single page which was bequeathed to us by dead white males who celebrated the subjection of others in the name of European supremacy, should we now raise the question whether we should distance ourselves from Christianity, also responsible for the most despicable crimes against humanity? And why not? From the university, this university, which is in fact an offspring of Christian search for truth, however misguided this search may seem to us with the benefit of hindsight. There are some among us who believe, and quite legitimately so, that the time has come to accommodate voices which have not been sufficiently heard in the past. So inviting Miriam De Bruyne, who other than her gender cannot add a darker complexion and any visible desire to her claim to be heard here, may appear like a step back in the long march to freedom from Eurocentrism. But then again, I strongly believe that what really matters, just like with Karl Schlettwein and his family, is the much more enticing prospect of pitting our heads together in conversation about all the possible worlds made unfeasible or hidden away by the ways of seeing of the past that we can recover today if we were open enough to the idea of human frailty. So the harsh nature of our judgment of the past and of the people who failed to see things with the same kind of clarity that we see them today should not blind us to the possibility that what we take for granted today may be the subject of raised eyebrows 100 years from now. And the passion with which we condemn and seek token us to the possibility that what we take for granted today may be the subject of raised eyebrows 100 years from now. And the passion with which we condemn and seek token us to the possibility that what we take for granted today may be the subject of raised eyebrows 100 years from now. And the passion with which we condemn and seek token us to the possibility that what we take for granted today may be the subject of raised eyebrows 100 years from now. And the passion with which we condemn and seek token. Is very grateful for the support of the Schlettwein family and feel very proud to be able to help them in their endeavors. Miriam De Bruyne, whom I now invite to take the floor, is a formidable fellow traveler, helping us make sense of the ways we came to have a world of margins and centers. So welcome, Miriam. Miriam De Bruyne.
You are really many. Thanks for these exaggerations, because that's what it is. I feel humble, very small. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of you, your husband. Dear colleagues, dear friends, I hope I can make it. Thanks also to the organization to invite me. And when I said yes, I did not realize what I was saying yes to, because it's not difficult to talk to students, it's not difficult to talk to people you don't know, but you are my family. So I really hope that my talk will also lead us into a debate. Yeah, let's see where we can get to. So after these things, I will read my text for you and show you some slides while talking. You look at the slides and you make of it what you want. I'm not going to explain everything to you. I think there's a lot of imagination in all of you, and that should work, because that's what academy should be about. I set the scene. When I started research on mobile telephony in West and Central Africa in 2006, I had no idea where this would lead me to. It was really a step. Nothing seems to be the same on return trips. Until today, I'm struggling with this digitalization of my research fields and research in itself. What are the social, political, and economic consequences, and how do they translate in our practice as academics? This is sort of the activist in me. I think communication has to be a human right. But that the herdsman, my friend who called me on his Nokia phone in 2006 from the cattle camp in central Mali, while I was at home in the Netherlands, nipping my hot coffee, would have become influenced by jihadist movements, also as a consequence of audios and preachers, and fighter videos in his smartphones or the smartphones of his younger siblings, of his son. That was then, in 2006, unimaginable. His political agency has transformed in the digital environment that nowadays also includes the Sahel. I will share my wonders and amazements with you today. How did the digitalization of our environment change social and political processes, both in African societies and in the field of qualitative study of these societies? Will it lead to a practice in which old hierarchies of production of knowledge will fade away? With these questions, I also refer to the pioneering work of Carl Schlettwein, whose ideas about archiving and sharing knowledge have laid, as if I read it correctly, a basis to develop critical knowledge production as a field. And I'm honored to speak in his name today. What I argue is that the digital environment offers qualitative researchers, who I am as well, a new challenge with regard to critical knowledge production. It allows new forms of collaboration in which we can include alternative forms of writing with visuals, audios comprising multiple dimensions of research and publication. It enables us to bridge. This bridging can be with scholars who are based in different parts of the world, but it is also bridging with those who we normally would call our informants. In my view, the position of informants will radically change in this digital future, and the academia will have to embrace an idea of real co-production or co-creation of knowledge that includes other knowledge fields like the arts, journalism, but certainly also informants as citizen scientists. Will the citizen, the herdsman, the youth all become equal sharers of the digital space and the exchange of knowledge? Digitization of African studies as a field of practice and reflection is the decolonization challenge ahead of us. I hope it will be an inclusive process. I will take you through some of my thoughts on the dynamics of digitalization of communication, the introduction of mobile phones and smartphones. I concentrate on communication and information as the building stones to understand the effects of this new world. From these societal processes, socio-political change, I distill dynamics that we can as well apply to the practice of African studies itself. The digitization of knowledge will have revolutionary effects. A note on Africa and digitization. Let's have a look at this map. It confirms what is often labeled digital divide. And also it refers to the regions where I work in West and Central Africa as not connected. But it certainly also confirms that Africa is not a country. When we speak about the digital and Africa, we should be aware of the wide diversity of connectivities. I base myself foremost on my studies in West and Central Africa, be aware of that. My experience with the knowledge institutions are with the African Studies Center in Leiden and Leiden University. And it's also worth to say that I am trained as an anthropologist. Elisio already explained that, and I work in this history institute. And I have been concentrating on this kind of digitization and knowledge production since 2006. The background of the researcher, the diversity of Africa count in the things we talk about. Let's quickly scrutinize the communication landscape and the digital. This map shows you the difference in GSM, so mobile telephony coverage, from 2001 to 2013. The rapid growth of mobile telephony in Africa has no precedent in world history of communication. In a decade, first the cities, then the rural areas were connected. Indeed, in the period between 2006 and 2013, the regions where I did my research in central Chad and central Mali, and in Cameroon, these areas, it has meant an enormous leap forward in communication. This was expected to have revolutionary effects. Just a few citations from people from Bamenda in Cameroon who were then simply using voice. It helps to communicate. I like the phone. People were enthusiastic. It is the good thing the whites have brought. I like that explanation very nicely. They acknowledge the social change it brought in their lives. And then probably read the following text. It's a bit long, you don't need to read it all. The result can be nothing less than a new organization of society. A state of things where every individual, however secluded, will have at call every other individual in the community. The time is close at hand when the scattered members of civilized communities will be as closely united as the various members of the body now are by the nervous system. Well, okay, this could be the conclusion of the research that I did on mobile telephony till 2013. However, this is a conclusion from a study from 1880. It's just a reminder that we should not think that what we see is always the revolution or so new. We can learn a lot from comparison with historical times. I won't do that here, but I do it in my work. However, it cannot be denied that the new ICTs have changed the speed of communication. They have limited distance and enabled rapid transfer of voice and knowledge, of information flows. I would first of all relate the rise in mobile communication, and that's a bit contrary to many anthropologists who write about it. Well, not that many, because there are not that many. But I would like to link it to the fact that there has been a rush of companies who saw their chance to enter a new market. It is clear that the liberalization of the communication market at the end of the last century is probably the most important factor in the increase in communication technology. The implantation of masts, like the one here in central Mali, is not a very costly endeavor. It allows many people to connect, and the small bits paid for every call do allow for a high profit for these companies. The individual states profit through the taxes they raise on both the calls and the companies. It has been compared to a gold mining enterprise. Just like one of the technicians of a mobile company who were implanting the masts in southern Sudan, then, in 2007, he told us that it is a good endeavor and that will lead the company to the customers who pay, exploring the poverty market. In these early days of mobile telephony, it was sold as a development enterprise. The next step foreseen by the CEO of Zain, a company based in Kuwait, was to connect over borders. He saw money when he told me this. This company then, in negotiations, was overtaken the Dutch company Celtel. And then it would be sold again, 2 times. And huge profits flow into the pockets of these, mostly external to Africa companies. Attempts of local companies to develop into a lucrative business are really rare. Attempts of local companies, in Mali, it is the presence of Orange, a French company, that dominates. In Cameroon, MTN, a Southern Africa company. And in Chad, the market has 2 main operators, Airtel from India, and Orange and Tigo, Italy-based, and Orange also plays a role, the French. The companies have, however, influenced enormously and colored the street with their publications and all that. The protests, however, in Cameroon against the taxes of companies, every now and then it happens there, the high cost of mobile telephony and connectivity in Chad, that became a fierce discussion in Facebook exchanges just recently, the rising concerns of spending too much money on the telephone are indicators that whatever the phone revolution does, it is foremost a commercial and business enterprise, basically bringing profit to international companies and authoritarian regimes, exploiting the user. But anyhow, let's go to the effects. Voice. The first years of mobile telephony were the years of voice. Hans-Peter Hahn and Kibora, in an article of 2008, have related the explanation of the rapid adoption of mobile telephony to the oral culture of African societies. To be honest, I think that is kind of exoticizing. I don't like it. I rather link it to the need for communication in a globalizing world that had its precedents in Africa in mobile cultures. When we analyze the mobility of people and their communities in Cameroon, Chad, and in Mali, it seems rather logical that mobile communication followed suit after the old forms of communication that were mainly modes of travel, as fixed lines were expensive, roads often in disarray, or where these were nearly absent, as in more remote regions. Sociality, economic relations flourished much better with a more regular possibility to connect through voice. Indeed, these early years of mobile communication, with the support of new ICTs, have shown a clear change in social relating and the reinforcement of existing relationships over distance. The tendency is that mobile communication reinforces strong ties in the networks and makes weak ties less important. That is the theory of Granovetter, very old, 1978, but it was getting a new jacket in these discussions. But as he says, this development contains the risk of a creation of communities whose borders are not national, but ethnic and probably transnational. Mobile telephones have not always been democratizing. It is depicted as a democratizing tool by many discussions in ICT 4D, ICT for development. I think that the new social constellations that appear do not eradicate hierarchies. The mobile phone communication followed old models of communication, and in some cases it did enhance existing power relations. Like the organization of diasporic networks could also empower existing relations. For instance, the chief of Baba in the grassfields in Cameroon. He controls a network of diasporic countrymen for whom this direct link he was calling under a tree with all these people, somewhere in the USA, Germany, and whatever. It made it possible, or impossible for these people in the diaspora to escape payment to the king. And at the same time, it introduced new power relations. I think we should not forget that although there's this reinforcing of old relations, there's also new people popping up in the economy of the mobile telephony. Those who were able to control these new forms of communication, like the shop owners, the booth owners, and they gained real new positions in society. The grosso modo effects of these type of linkages have been reinforcement of existing structures, probably compartmentalization along ethnic and sometimes religious lines. In short, a reconfiguration of the social of our world. From 2009 onwards, the voice communication and its technologies gradually disappeared and made place for smart technology. The smartphone introduced a new epoch of information and communication possibilities. With the advancement of the technology, more forms of connectivity are introduced. The arrival of the smartphone has been an important step. Internet connectivity was until their arrival confined to cyber cafes, to university campuses, to chic hotels, and to some private companies. The connectivity was often of poor quality. The high fiber connections never really reached to the areas where I worked, and not even to the capital cities. The heading of a 2013 CNN article, which is "The Real Mobile Revolution, Africa's Smartphone Future," summarizes all this. I think Africa has a smartphone future. And especially the cheap phone produced in China conquered the African market. Here you see the model Techno, the Techno phones that contain free and light versions of Facebook. And this is already in the phone when you buy it. They were popular in 2009 in Central Chad, where I could only phone with a Turaya this is a satellite phone, for very high costs as recently as 2003. Now, communication between the PhD students from our team, between Holland and Chad, was easily done through Facebook Messenger. The smartphone allows access to internet, and forfaits to buy gigabytes of internet have increased the possibilities of the phone revolutionary. Voice was combined with many other techniques. And one important thing probably that we have to add now to our thinking is information. In his book Information, Gleich in 2011, he wrote this book, A Theory and a Flow. He gives an overview of how information has always been a motor of social change. In communication theory, information simply consists of dots and stripes. It is technique. However, through this technique, meaning and content is traveling and reaches out to people who are connected through these techniques. These channels of information allow the shaping of meanings, meanings that may have power, the power to influence societal change. So maybe introduce a new concept, information work. Information is a collection of facts from which a conclusion can be drawn. Information is something that is received and understood. It works. So what is traveling over the technique of dots and stripes has a meaning. Information is not neutral, just like the carrier of information is not really neutral. It is a dynamic process. We can compare it with Johannes Fabian's understanding of memory as memory work. It is the constant interpretation, sending, making choices, and remembering that make information a complex and highly social and politically informed thing. A thing that may have, like communication, the capacity to transform. It is an active process. And this is especially what it has become in the new internet fora and platforms in cyberspace. This is certainly also a process in which the reinvention and consolidation of power relations are important. With the advancement of information and communication through social media, a new dynamic is brought in the socio-political change. For the youth in Central Chad, this was a revelation in 2009. For young people in Central Mali, we saw an enormous growth in smartphones in 2012. In general, anno 2016, the smartphone has gained enormous terrain, though it is still confined to a relatively small group in most countries where I do my research. Can we compare this information work with the notion of radio trottoir that was introduced by Stephen Ellis in an article in 1989? He defines radio trottoir as news traveling without a hierarchical node, where the news is created. The main participants in this digital radio on the pavement are the youth. Here is an example of a moment of citizen journalism that changed, at least temporarily, the political scene in Chad. This video on the first capture of Facebook is a video of torture of children in prison, and it held the state responsible, and the state could not escape. Protest followed, a new move for youth movements. A note on how this information work on the pavement can also be devastating. It is full of rumors, of fake films, of creations to convince people for a cause. For instance, the film circulating during the conflicts in Central African Republic have been upsetting the social fabric and infusing religious contradictions. It has exacerbated violence, maybe. Films that were circulating in WhatsApp groups in October, November last year in Cameroon were apparently fake, using film of other areas of past times to create an image of terror and violence of that moment in Cameroon. News is often manipulated, also on social media. It goes without doubt that YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Imo, and more recently WhatsApp have become connectors, not only of small messages, but of complete information flows, discussion forums, films, audio messages, where politics and the social get new forms and interpretations, where especially urban youth and urbanized rural youth unite with the diaspora and friends all over the world, where money flows have become digitized. Access to websites, blogging, has become a reality. These media are democratic and hybrid. They are ad hoc, flexible, dynamic, and very difficult to control. Although, indeed, it might still be a small proportion of the population using smartphones, they have a tremendous potential to influence socio-political life. The slide of this phone box in Central Chad is taken in 2009. In my opinion, this phone box sort of summarizes the new information technology. The box carries messages and with informed meaning. Obama is inside, and well, I know you can't maybe read it, but there's a lot of messages there. The technology creates new possibilities of information spreading that are depicted with concepts like citizen journalism, citizen science, citizen alerts. Let's move to the main actors on the pavement. It's the Android youth. In a speech to the nation, Paul Biya, the president of Cameroon, on the 10th of February 2016, Youth Day, introduced a new concept, Android generation. The Android generation, according to him, is innovative and lives with and in the digital economy. And that is the future of the nation. The compliments and all that were given in this speech were denounced, of course, in the media, also on social media. But interestingly, the term Android generation and then later Android youth has become a concept. That Paul Biya in the fall of 2016 decided to close down internet and deny the Android youth their development as a result of protests is super irony. The Android youth are an important factor in the socio-political change that we observe today. Two examples. Urban youth. Increasingly, it's the urban youth, the urban Android youth, who are leading protest movements in various cities in Senegal, Burkina Faso, N'Djamena, Kinshasa, and so on. In his speech on 10 February 2017, after the protests and revolts in Anglophone Cameroon, the discourse of Paul Biya had completely changed. He now saw these Android youth as irresponsible and called for a renewal of their patriotism. That these protests were indeed as well organized through SMS, messenger, calling, and so on, and hence the same Android youth who are in entrepreneurship innovation, as they were called in 2016, seemed of no significance anymore. The protests of the youth are informed by news, messages, analysis, exchange carried in smartphones. It is part of information work, affecting the directions of political development. Increasingly, the authoritarian states of Chad, Cameroon, and Mali act accordingly. The closing down of the internet in Chad after the presidential elections of April 10th last year, in Cameroon after the protests in northwest Cameroon, and recently in Mali after the protests of the youth against changes in the constitution, show how powerful information work through new technology is. And as a friend in Chad confided to me, la peur a changé du camp, meaning that governments are increasingly aware of the power in the medium of communication. This phenomenon also touches the rural areas, like central Mali. In 2012, the northern Mali northern Mali came in the grip of a Tamashek liberation movement that was later hijacked by jihadi-oriented movements. In 2013, the region was liberated by the French, followed a UN mission. The UN mission did not really consider Central part as part of the battlefield, but they were wrong. It left the population without any protection and security, and today Central Mali is one of the most insecure and disturbed regions in the Sahel. Amadou, who called me at breakfast in 2006, is now in a situation that he no longer knows what to do and which side to choose. He is inclined to choose for the jihadi movement. It is interesting to note that 2012 was the start of the intensification of the use of mobile phones and smartphones in the area. I cannot enter into detail here, but will just highlight the role of mobile telephony and smartphones in this, in the situation of the Fulani in this region. The Fulani are nomadic herders. In 2012, the jihadi occupants came with messages of security and connectivity through mobile phones. Then the phones became filled with preaches, videos that sent clear messages about marginalization, commonality between nomads and their Muslim brothers, and so on. The nomads were drawn into armed action as the state no longer protected them. They trained in the camps of the jihadi and bought arms. The nomads were already convinced of the need for change and had started to mobilize their brothers through phone calls, SMS, and also traveling to unite in a nomad movement to claim their rights. Their appeal to the international and national bodies did not have any result. And this all culminated in the organization of nomads in a movement. The Android youth joined in armed groups and in a communication network. They continued receiving preachers of increasingly fanatic preachers in their phones, and the neglect of the state and international community drew them into the actions of weapons and attacks. That is where we are now in Mali, and control of the situation has become very difficult. The state reacts militarily and oppressive. The young Fulani are arrested and discriminated, immediately depicted as jihadi. This Android youth is in contact with diaspora and the Android youth in the cities, Bamako, and they are in contact with them and keep each other informed, also via Facebook alert sites, for instance. It seems very difficult to control or countervail this powerful connectivity that is mingled with arms. Citizen journalism, Facebook activism, connectivity have become tools in the movements that we have seen occurring in the past 5 years in West and Central Africa. Of course, underlying problems are profound, but these movements also develop because of connectivity and the role of Android youth. I think by now I've shown that mobile telephony, smartphones, internet, in short the digital, has changed societies in social, political and also economic ways. That this raises questions of where this will go is clear from the literature that is produced over the past few years. Research into this digital space is still in its infancy. Methodologies are under construction, theories in the making. One direction that I try to develop on is the political ecology of this digital communication. It influences also our practice of knowledge production. The conclusions of the changing realities, as I have tried to describe, have consequences not only for the appearance of new fields or layers in the study of African societies, but also for the way we researchers do this. Information flows, pavements, digitized radio trottoir do also immediately reflect on our practice in academia. Let's turn to 1990, when I started doing my PhD fieldwork in Mali. Then the nearest telephone was 3 hours driving from the nomads' camp, where we were staying. And the only public phone was to be found in the post office. That was then. We wrote a book on nomads and how they cope with insecurity. We made a translation of a text of a bard about the history of the region. These were texts that were, after publication, kept in repositories, indeed well read by a community of scholars interested in the Sahel and in the Fulani. But today, these texts have been digitized, and they have been read also by educated elites from the Fulani groups we were working with then. The texts have been integrated in the debates on Fulani and their supposed implication in jihadism today. Parts of its conclusions come back in discussion with members of the UN mission in Mali. Other books on the Fulani are also traveling in the digital spheres. Some of them relate Fulani origin to Ethiopia and the heroic memory of jihadism. These ideas are back on stage in statements of the Fulani defending their cause towards the international community. And we, as authors of these works, have become part of these discussions anew. We cannot keep ourselves as outsiders. The discussions on Facebook and the exchanges on phones are part of the pavement where our topics of research are discussed. This is a form of co-creation and use of our text that was not steered by us, but now we have to step in to be part of this creation. The digital environment, the communication possibilities have changed our position. We cannot not be engaged. In the practice of present-day research, these dynamics are upfront. The educated elites, the Android youth, are part of our research, both informing us about the field, but also sharing their analysis. They work with us on the information that will fill the future of our academic publications. I started this lecture by stating that our informants will become co-creators. The digital environment and connectivity that goes with it will force academics who work on Africa to change their attitude to work really with Africa, but also the other way around. This form of co-creation will allow the observers and readers to see what the knowledge that is produced in this interaction is about. It will give credits to the co-creators in the process of knowledge production about and with Africa and African relations. Such forms of the creation of knowledge will not only construct shared knowledge, it will also give more transparency to the qualitative methods of research. It will also, as well, help to find a solution to the hierarchization of knowledge, which is enveloped in the debate on the decolonization of knowledge production. Probably I'm too optimistic, as the working environment in the digital is not yet optimal. Skype does not always work. Digitizing materials is still in process. During a meeting on digital humanities, for instance, where we discussed data mining as an important tool for research, it clearly appeared that, the data mining as tool for research contains a big risk, the risk of excluding some parts of Africa, where data sets are still in the making from knowledge, and then they will be excluded from the knowledge production in the new age. To conclude, the image of disconnected Africa and the digital divide persists in maps. The digital divide that they show might give the impression that the stories that I presented to you are fantasies, and that the ideas I have about collaboration and co-creation are simply science fiction. However, I hope that my stories have shown that there is a lot more than these maps show. Maps are based on statistics, often from fixed net. Smartphones and their internet connectivity are not taken into account. African societies are mobile, and it is the mobile devices that will help revolutionize. Is it not true that digital innovations like mobile money or mobile health are developed on the African continent? The future is to work together with the many technology and innovation hubs in Africa. Why not develop mobile libraries, mobile archives, memories, and possibilities for serious information work, so that we can indeed co-create a knowledge economy in which a diversity of African youth from rural and urban can find its way. This will be the true revolution of the digital. This is where I am in my journey into the digital and Africa. It is time that we, Africanists, take up the challenge and use the digital humanities, the things that are catchily explained as digital anthropology, maybe digital African studies, as platforms to discuss a truly and deep transformation of knowledge production. Thanks.
Miriam, thank you very much for your talk, for opening our week of African Studies here at the University of Basel. It's been a very engaged and engaging talk, and we look forward to continuing or starting a discussion over a drink outside. As a token of appreciation, I've got no flowers, I have to admit. It's the kind of things you just remember when the talk has started.
Not for a hotel room. It's okay.
So we brought a preview of what you're going to hear this week, some South African jazz.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And of course something to make you welcome here in Basel, some chocolates offered by the town of Basel.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.